So we're here on behalf of Accion Venture Lab. And Accion Venture Lab is a seed stage investment fund that invests in fintech, financial technology companies that promote financial inclusion. And we're a global fund. We have about 31 investments to date around the world. Our regions of focus are Asia, Africa, the US, and Latin America. We have one investment in Nigeria, a company called Lydia. If you aren't familiar with it, check it out. It's awesome. It's basically supply chain financing, all digital, to MSMEs in Lagos right now. I will turn over the mic to my colleagues, and then we'll get started.
So my name is Ashley Lewis. I lead our investment work across West Africa. So I split my time between Accra and Lagos, spend a good amount of time here. And as Corey mentioned, we've invested in Lydia, but my entire job is to find that next fintech startup that we can support. So we invest up to $500,000 US. A big part of that is capital, but another component of that is portfolio engagement, and that's what Corey spends all of her time on, really helping our portfolio companies grow and expand. As Corey mentioned, we have our one portfolio organization here in Nigeria, but we also have 6 others focused on Africa. So about 25% of our portfolio is Africa focused. It's a huge interest of ours. So if you are running a fintech venture, or if you're interested in learning more about fintech, feel free to talk to us. After this session, we're actually doing fintech office hours, so meeting one-on-one with individuals who are launching a fintech startup, and we can talk to you guys about your financing needs or other ways that we can support your growth.
All right, good morning. My name is Avery Thomas Moore, and I am running our Company Builder program. So we are looking for people who want to be fintech founders. So if you are on the fence, we are going to kind of recruit people and help them think of ideas, validate those ideas, and fund their pilot with the hope of creating pipeline for Ashley. And so if you are interested, I'll go through a little bit more detail later, but come see us at Fintech Office Hours.
All right, so customer segmentation, customer strategy, customer acquisition, what are all these words? What do they mean? And that's what we're going to cover today. So a quick look at timing. We're going to focus first on customer segmentation. I'll talk to you a little about how at Accion Venture Lab we work with our portfolio companies on their own customer segmentation. And then there will be some time for you guys to work on customer segmentation together. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. There's not going to be a formal Q&A at the end, so ask questions as they come up. Don't hesitate. This is learning for me and hopefully for all of you too. We'll then dive into channel analysis, so talking about how to actually go about acquiring your customers after you've identified who they are and which ones to prioritize. And then finally, as Avery kind of teased about, we're going to go into an exciting new initiative that Accion Venture Lab is launching in Nigeria shortly. So Avery will talk more about that at the end of this presentation. All right, I need to do my own audience segmentation right now. So to help me get a better understanding of who you all are and what you're doing here, why you're interested in this session, let's do a raise of hands. So starting first, if you know everything there is to know about customer strategy and segmentation, thank you. If you know everything about customer strategy and customer segmentation, you live it, you breathe it, you sleep it, raise your hand. Great, because I was going to ask that person to replace me. So let's, 4, if you know a bit about if you know customer strategy, if you've done it before, and actually built out customer segmentation and personas for your customers, raise your hand. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then 3, if you have heard of customer strategy before, if you have some sort of customers, raise your hand. Okay, great. 2, if you're interested in this, haven't done it before, but you know why you're here, raise your hand. Okay, the last one is if you have no idea why you're here, and I don't think I've seen all the hands raised, so then a bunch of you need to leave the room right now. Just kidding. So, customer segmentation. If anybody has their own business, can you raise your hands? Okay, cool, awesome. And if you work for a startup, can you raise your hand? Okay, great. Awesome. Cool. So why are you here? Why is customer strategy important? Yes. You want to keep improving on it? Yeah, absolutely. Who else? Yes. Yes, it's important. You said 2 important things there. It's important to know your market, and it's important to narrow your market. At Venture Lab, we agree with you. We believe customer strategy is really important to know who you're serving, to understand who your market is, to be able to answer every single one of the questions up here. And I hope today will equip you with the capability to do so with your own customers, either now or in the future. At the end of the day, a well-done customer strategy improves your own profitability. It makes you successful. You need to understand who your customer is in order to acquire customers. If you can't figure out how to acquire customers, your business will fail. So a customer strategy is crucial. Now, as Ashley mentioned, we talk with a lot of companies and are looking for startups all over the world. And in this, we've talked with over 2,000 companies to date, screening them for investment. And what we often find is more times than not, most companies don't have a customer strategy in place. And when we ask them why, it's because it's daunting. And I get that. We get that. When you're a new company, it can very much seem like there's not enough data or visibility into your customers yet. Your customer might not even have a sense of what your product or service does. Many times, the early stage ventures that we invest in are introducing an entirely new product or service to their market. So having to explain that and interact with customers and understand what they believe that product, what needs that product will meet, it takes time. And at the end of the day, if you're a startup, there's resource constraints, time and money. But it doesn't need to be as difficult as it can seem. It doesn't need to be academic. It doesn't need to be too time-consuming. In fact, you can do it with limited data and intuition. So let's look at how. Venture Lab has worked on this framework. It's what we call our customer strategy toolkit. And it identifies how to really go about creating and developing a customer strategy. And there's 2 main focuses here. First, who your customer is. Second, how to engage and acquire that customer. Under who, it's about understanding your target market. It's about segmenting your customers. And segmenting your customers means dividing up your customer base into groups. or clusters around similarities, whether it's attitudes, behavior, demographics. We'll talk about that a bit later. And then eventually prioritizing those segments. So that's the who. The how is really understanding your value proposition, knowing what need you're meeting in the market, optimizing your channel strategy, so figuring out how you're going to acquire customers. Is it by TV? Is it by roadshow? Is it by flyers? Is it by agents? And then at the end of the day, optimizing your profitability. Today we're going to focus on the segmentation piece, so how to segment your customer base. So as we talked about, if you're starting a company, if you have started a company, if you work at a startup, you know this. There are limitations for early stage startups, but there's ways to mitigate and get around those limitations. One limitation that exists is that your customer base is small when you first start. How can you get around that? Well, there might be other potential partners serving that customer base. So say your target customer are school kids. Perhaps you talk to some of the schools that they're attending, or other schools that they might not be attending but could have some useful information for you. There's ways to get around not having data without starting from scratch. A second limitation is that there might just not be information on your customers. We have one company that we've invested in Kenya, and it provides input financing, so fertilizer and seeds, to rural farmers in this small town called Nakuru. There's not a lot of information on farmers in Nakuru. So what did we do? We went out and we talked to farmers. We met them in their homes. We launched SMS surveys to get some basic responses. We held focus groups. We just went out and started talking to them to get some data. You can do that. Another limitation might be that you have a new product, and this product hasn't really had customer interaction. How do you get around that? Well, your product doesn't need to be perfect when you go out to test it and see how people and potential customers interact with it. You can start with what we call a minimum viable product, MVP version. And you can give that to potential customers and see what they think. See how they would use it. See how they touch it. Just observe. I worked at a solar energy company for the past 4 years in Kenya, and we all the time were introducing small solar products or bigger systems to customers who weren't that familiar with solar. They had just been using kerosene before. So this was a totally new idea that energy from the sun can actually be used to power their phones and radios and whatever. How do we get around not knowing too much about how they interacted with our products? In one instance, we were trying to figure out for our solar lantern what our on and off button should look like. Should it be a press button that you press in and it turns on, and you press in again and it turns off? Or should it be a switch that you flick on or off? Again, we had no idea, and we just wanted to see what our customers preferred. So we took our MVP of both products and just put it in the hands of customers. Let them use it, try it out for a week. They weren't perfect by any means, but they were enough to get some information. A week later, the families brought back the solar lanterns, and sure enough, the lantern with the switch was broken. What we found out is that our target customer was typically a household head, a mother or a father. They had kids. And switches are really fun for kids to play with. So the children would switch the switch on, switch it off, switch it on, and it would break. So sure enough, we went with the push button, and we hardly had any instances of a lot of activity in the button breaking. So it was something so easy as that, and it was a lot better that we didn't go out with our final finished product because we were able to figure this stuff out early. And that's why customer segmentation is so important. It's something you constantly build on. And as you develop your customer personas and understand who you're targeting and what they want and what they do and collecting data, you build on that. Or you develop hypotheses and you build on those. You test those and see if they're right. They probably aren't, but that's okay. You just need to get out there. You need to test. You need to collect data. So how do we go about segmentation? Again, customer segmentation is dividing up your potential customer base into similar groups. And at most, you should have maybe 5 customers. 3 to 5 we recommend. First, to go about getting those in place, you need to actually, as we're talking about, start collecting data. You can then develop a short list of the criteria, the priority criteria to target your priority customers. After you have that data, the second step is actually putting it into a framework. And through that framework, you can identify priority customer segments. And then third, it's actually building out the profiles. So making them into personas, people who you can understand and start developing your products or services for. So what type of data do you want to collect? There's 3 main types. There's demographic data, which is mainly about who are your customers. What's their age, what's their gender, their household size, income, employment status. This type of information you can get from surveys or onboarding questions or secondary market data. And it's useful for really describing your customer segments. Then there's behavioral data. That's how do customers act today? What is their behavior? Do they spend a lot of money? Do they save a lot of money? Do they borrow? What products do they use? How familiar are they with technology and finances? What channels do they use? Do they scroll on Instagram or Twitter, or do they use Snapchat? How big is their social network? Do they belong to churches or schools or savings groups? Understanding this is important for understanding how to target these segments. And then there's needs-based data. So what do customers need? And that's critical for your value proposition. What pain point is your product or your service or your business solving for? You get this from interviews or surveys, and it is hard to understand because it typically relates to emotional states, but it also is something that can be developed by building on the types of data that you have. Demographic data, as I said, is normally the easiest to get. So what we say is start with demographics first, and then layer the other types of data on top of it. Start collecting them gradually, seeing best ways of collection, and building from there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the rest of the deck. So the first step was collecting data. The second step is using a framework to identify your ideal customer. And we recommend using a 2x2 to do this. A 2x2 represents your entire addressable market. And within that, you then identify key customer groupings based on where they fit within specific criteria. So you'll see on the y-axis, this is valuing transaction behavior as a critical, one of the most important attributes for this company's customer. On the bottom axis, it's financial literacy. What they've done is actually within the 2x2, mapping out that their ideal customer is someone who has high transaction behavior as well as high financial literacy. This could be potentially a credit card company. They want a customer who knows how to save and how to spend and budget, but they also want someone who will use their credit card. That's their ideal customer. And so they've pinpointed those two criteria as being essential to identify who that customer is. That customer is typically aspirational. What you find is that there's segments near it. And by identifying how those segments fall within the 2x2, so relating to the criteria that we're mapping against, you can then figure out who to target. This is all about narrowing your market and being super focused. You're starting a company in Nigeria and immediately want to target all of Nigeria, you're going to be scattered. It's going to be confusing. And you'll end up not being able to actually acquire customers in the way that you want. Instead, narrow it down. And that's the goal of all of this, is get your customer into an ideal state, narrow it down into very specific criteria, and then target that customer. Identify which channels they use, identify where they live, identify what they want, target to that. So all of this is about narrowing it down. Sometimes it's not easy to come up with just two criteria. So there's also this segmentation approach which you can use. And this looks more at a range of criteria. What you would do is you would develop this for one of your customers and then eventually do it for 3 to 5 potential customers. This goes into more detail, but allows you to have more room and freedom to move within ranges. So as you can see on the left-hand column, it builds out 2 priorities under each type of data. So under economic, income and net worth, under attitudinal, emotional state, empowerment, external reliance, under behavioral, transaction habits, financial literacy, tech literacy, under demographic, employment status, age, geography. And you can see a company has started filling it out, and this will represent one of their customers. They'll then choose another customer, someone who doesn't fit into the profile that has been already developed, and eventually go on until you have some sort of customer personas. And from there, you can do the same thing that you did with the 2x2. You can understand who your customers are and how to target them. And then finally, so after you've collected the data, after you used segmentation framework to map your customers and determine who to prioritize, you can build out profiles for each of the customers. And this is key to your business. What is your value proposition to each of the segments? How does that vary? How do the demographic, behavioral, and attitudinal characteristics vary across segments? What percentage do those segments make up of your current customer base? What percentage do they make up of your market? What key channels do each of these segments use? And then when you actually contact a customer or try to sell something, what's the likelihood that they convert? Say you talk to 10 people about your product and 5 end up buying it. You have a 50% conversion rate. That's pretty darn good. How can you improve that? How can you make it better? So I'm going to show you a few examples now of different ways that companies have gone about segmenting their customer bases. And we'll then have about 5 minutes for you guys to work on that together based on your current company, the company you've started, the company you work for, but just trying to do this yourselves. The first example is a company that digitized Susus. So rather than having a savings group meet on a weekly, a monthly basis, they actually developed a platform so that it can be done in a digitized way. Now, how did they figure out who their target customer was? Well, it needed to be someone who knew what Susus were, and it was digitized, so it needed to be someone who was also tech savvy. Those were the two most important criteria that this company identified as criteria that would lead to their ideal customer. Now again, the ideal customer, it's aspirational. It's not necessarily every customer that you're serving. So it's important that you segment your customers. And that's what they did. They identified people, customer segments, who had high tech savviness, but weren't as familiar with Susus. They identified people who had low tech savviness, but were really familiar. And they identified people in the middle. By understanding each of the customer segments and building out their profiles, they were then able to figure out who they should target and how to target them. So it was important for them to know the primary use case. Why were people borrowing money? Why were they joining these groups? Did they want to save? Were they saving up for something that they wanted to spend? Did they want to build their business? Did they want to build their credit? All of that's important to know because it affects how the company would message itself to these different segments. That's their value proposition. That's the need they're meeting. By understanding that, you can effectively target your customer segments. In a similar vein, understanding how familiar they are with Susus or how familiar they are with technology is important. Are you going to have to provide more onboarding support to customers if they're not as tech savvy? Are you going to have to teach them about how the groups work if they're not as familiar with Susus? And then the demographics, language preferences, that affects also marketing. What language will you market your material in? If the demographics have an impact on the makeup of the Susus, will that affect how you organize the groups? And as you can tell, there are blank sections within this, and there are next steps, things to verify. This company was very clear in acknowledging that they didn't know everything, and that's okay. It's about creating hypotheses around the customers that you're targeting and testing those. Hypotheses, test. Hypotheses, test. And you refine along the way. So another example. You can see there's different criteria for these because they're different products. Every business will have its own unique attributes. Let's look at small business loans. This was a company that wanted to give loans to micro businesses. So really, really small, single entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs who were very aspirational, who were growing quickly and wanted to build their business fast. So this is the lower right-hand corner. Their attributes, the criteria that was most important to them was business size. They knew they wanted to target micro businesses. So they wanted businesses that were small. They did want businesses that were growing quickly, who they could really support in building up their business. So for them, their ideal customer was on the upper left parameter. And this ideal customer will move around depending on what your attributes are. It doesn't always need to be on the upper right. Another example is Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola segmented their customers as based on age and money spent on soft drinks. Within the market, the different size of the circles represent the different market size that those segments occupy. Coca-Cola realized that they were missing out on the millennial segment, that most of the customers who were purchasing Coca-Cola products, and this is in the US, were middle-aged and weren't always spending too much money on Coca-Cola products, and that this millennial customer base was rising fast, and they needed to catch them. They knew their customer base really well. They had built out profiles for each of their customers. They knew what they liked, what they wanted, how to advertise to them. And millennials especially, two things were important to them. One, they like sharing things. They use social media. They like sharing what they're doing. That's important to them. They also like to feel like they've co-created and added to something that they're using. They like to feel ownership. So Coca-Cola came up with the Share a Coke with a Friend campaign. They looked at the top 100 most popular names for millennials in the US and put them on Coke bottles instead of just the Coke brand. What they found was amazing. So within the first week of launching this campaign, they had 500,000 shares on Instagram with the hashtag Share a Coke. Their sales grew the market share grew by 2%, which is crazy for a company that already dominates the market. And for the first time in 11 years, they increased their volume sales of Coke products. And that was all because they targeted millennials. They knew what millennials wanted. They made their marketing campaign around that, and that led to success. They could have, if they wanted to target any other customer segment, they could have done that because they know their customers so well. And that's why creating a customer strategy, segmenting your customers, figuring out what channels they use, understanding their demographic, behavioral, needs-based data is so important. And that's why doing it sooner rather than later is so important too. I mean, can you imagine if Coke had no idea what millennials wanted? It would have taken them forever to figure this out. They developed this nearly overnight because they knew their customers like the back of their hand. Another example, so this was Amazon, was planning on wanted to increase sales of Amazon Prime. So Amazon Prime, it costs $100 a year and you have free shipping. So what mattered to them was the purchasing power of their customers. How much would they actually spend? How much could they spend? As well as their willingness to and likelihood to repeat purchases. So was there going to be a high percentage of recurring purchases from that customer? This allowed them to then hone in on entrepreneurs and target them. And so they created a whole new platform that with Amazon Prime, you could also get support for small business support. So they tailored their product to meet the target customer. This was Apple looking to launch Apple Payments, which basically allows you to pay with your iPhone to merchants. Again, these examples are this is US focused, but obviously has similarities to companies here in Nigeria and what companies are trying to do. Apple Payments was trying to figure out how to boost usage of their app. And they chose 2 criteria in a 2x2 matrix. The one was digital capability. That's like tech savviness. How likely are you to use your phone? Because that's indicative of whether or not you'll use your phone to make purchases. The second criteria that they identified as being most important was trust and data sharing. So customers who were likely to use phones and be tech savvy or digitally capable, as well as customers who were likely to have trust and share data, which you have to do when you're making a payment from your phone, we're going to be more likely to use Apple Payments. However, there's some people who don't trust a lot and aren't digitally capable. Can you say that 3 times fast? Because I can't. Those were the analogs. The wannabes who were trustworthy but not as tech savvy were different from the mainstreamers who were a little bit of both, though more on the trust side. The paranoids had low trust, but were medium tech savvy. And the nomads were on their own. That was who they wanted to target, but as you can see, because it only made up 10% of their customer base, they also wanted to target the mainstreamers and the chameleons. And by building out the personas, identifying who their ideal customer was, they could then develop profiles and personas around these. Does anybody have any questions? Go back. Yeah, what's ease to convert? That's a good question. So, and that's part of what we're talking about, is acquiring customers means that they're converting. So when you are acquiring a customer, your rate of conversion is, if you talk to 10 customers, how many will actually, or 10 potential customers, how many will actually become your customer? Oftentimes you have to talk with a lot of people to get someone to buy a product or service that you're selling. So it's important to know and to constantly track, and we tell this to all of our companies, your conversion rate. So if you talk to 10 people and 5 convert, it's half, 50% conversion. That's awesome. You typically don't see numbers that high. Ease to convert means how easy is it to acquire those customers? Yes. Yeah, it's actually not proprietary. So it is for some companies, but the sources that we found for this aren't. And what you find is that it's not totally new. They're not sharing everything with us. They're showing some attributes that are important. And back to one of the first slides, this is something that as a startup, you can really tap into. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and come up with data on your own, there might be some stuff out there. So it's not, none of this is proprietary. And if it is, it's been anonymized. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Struggle with what? Yeah. Yeah, great. Good questions. So it's not Nigerian companies by themselves that are not good at collecting data. It's every company out there for the reasons listed in the beginning. It can just seem daunting and hard. It seems time intensive. It seems very academic. So, I mean, as I said, we've talked with around 2,000 companies, all over the world. And a lot of them don't have a firm customer strategy in place. It's seen as being very daunting, as being very laborious, as being very distracting too. When you're just starting, you want to focus on your product, you want to focus on your service. But at the end of the day, if you don't know who your customer is, which I like to call like the flesh of your business, you can't build on the bones, the product, the service. It's important that you know that flesh to add to those bones. So how to go about collecting data? There are a couple ways mentioned on this slide, and you brought up some. So point of transaction, definitely. Collect some data. When you're first starting out and getting customers, I would say call a couple of those customers on the phone, because you can then ask them more qualitative questions. However, what you can also do is you can send out surveys after a customer has purchased your product, after they've talked to someone on the phone, after they have registered a warranty, what have you. You can send them a short SMS survey. You can also go and look through transaction data. So as you're selling, you'll be collecting information, and you can glean insights from that as well. So you should be collecting information at every single stop and codifying that information, tracking it, and building on it. Whether it's before you've even started selling your product and you're just getting a sense of who your customers are. Whether it's when you're selling your product and at the point of transaction, or whether it's once a quarter, once a week, once a month, and you send out a list of surveys to a select group of customers. There's lots of ways to collect data and lots of ways to test out what works the best for you. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So let's dive into so we talked about Apple payments. And then this last part, I'm throwing over to you guys. So for 5 minutes, I want you to think about either the company that you're starting, the company that you work for, or a dream company. A company that either exists or a company that you have in mind for launching one day. And create a 2x2 matrix for that company. Identify the 2 most important criteria for selecting your customers. And then come up with where different potential customer segments may fall. All right? 5 minutes, and then I'll have some of you come and just share what your customers and criteria are. All right? Any questions? What? Oh, you want to see a 2x2. You guys haven't memorized that? What? 2x2. It's the axis. So the X and the Y. There can be as many rows. So 5 minutes. to volunteer and share what they came up with? Yeah. So how about you and then you and you and you? Okay. So we'll do the four of you. I need one female. One. Come on, ladies. All right, we'll think about it. Okay, why don't you share your idea? So first, introduce the company, what you do, or what the company seeks to do, and then the two attributes that are most important. Do you want to come around? Okay.
Fine, yeah. Okay, my name is Otobong. Okay, I have this idea of doing a platform to provide cleaning services. Okay, so the whole idea or the name, the brand is Happy Home. Okay, so sorry. All right, thank you very much. So okay, so it's a platform where you could come on board and put a request on whatever service you want us to come and deliver to you. Okay, so the two criteria I used for my customer segmentation is income and nature of work. Now, okay. The customers who will come on board, yes. No, customers who will come on board for the service. Okay, so we provide cleaning services like home cleaning, your laundry also. Okay, so you can come on board and make a request that, okay, I want you to come to my house and clean it this weekend. Okay, so my criteria is, okay, you should be able to have some money to be able to pay for that service, and for the kind of customers should be people who don't really have time for such to do such jobs. Sure. Okay. 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 Okay.
Who else had? No? Okay.
Thank you. My business is all about having a kind of a food service delivery, so for health-conscious people. Yeah. So and I've been able to come up with two major things that I consider in targeting them, and that's they are health-conscious, and also they enjoy convenience. They enjoy convenience, and also they are health-conscious. In terms of the convenience I'm talking about, so we're talking about people that are very, very busy. So they can always sit down in the office, place order online. So there will be an interface online that they can place order online that's to order for their food. So we are talking of super moms, so which have a very low family, maybe they are two, so in which nobody at home to prepare food for them. So.
That's good. I like that. So you definitely, if it's a health-conscious food delivery service, you need people who are health-conscious.
Exactly. And being delivery, they enjoy convenience as well.
Yeah, and then convenience. Perfect.
Exactly.
I love that. Great.
Yeah, thank you. So, furthermore, the health consciousness, you was able to segment it to the vegans, yeah, the vegetarians. We talk of also the dieters, so people that engage in dieting, and also the sick. So these people are usually 40 years and above. So maybe they are diabetic or they are, so I'll be able to come up with that as well. And also, they earn a very reasonable amount of money. So they earn up to like 100,000 above, and at least they have a car in which they ride. So most probably they might not have a home of their own, but at least they drive a car. Right. So that's what I've been able to come up with.
Awesome. Perfect. Good job. All right. Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Suleiman. I'm co-founder for payments solution company. We work with an artificial bot, BIA. It's an artificial intelligence-powered bot that allows to do payments on a conversational interface. So, well, I segmented my customers into the 2x2 things. So I made it into technical capability and usage frequency. I went for the retail merchants, struggling users, the elderly, illiterates, people weren't so tech savvy, weren't familiar with the rigors of technology. It's an easy catch for them, but then there are probably people who would be low in technical capability. Millennials, corporates, people who are very familiar with the use of technology, so then they're just starting in the high rank. Retail merchants, mobile money newbies, people who are just new to a class in the middle class of technical capability and usage frequency. So that's a brief. All right, thank you.
You have a lot of customers. All right, last one.
All right, I have your e-toy company that is into toys for people that like convenience and service delivery, quick service delivery. So we are looking at people that have tech knowledge, survey, and people that enjoy online buying too. And the major focus are for parents, the mothers, the school teachers, and the event planners. So that's the segments we break.
You guys have done
As data, you don't actually identify where to place them on the matrix. It requires the data. You don't set them yourself, right?
good sense of who you might want to target, what criteria they might need to have. But it is just about developing that hypothesis. So you can actually do it, and then as you collect more data and start collecting that data, build on it and refine it and make iterations. And that is kind of leading into this next slide. So once you have the segments in the 2x2, make sure that you're constantly iterating, constantly testing out what you believe to be true, because that will change or it might not be true. So all of this should be done. Look at the example with Coca-Cola. They realized they weren't targeting millennials. So they changed their process and constantly iterated so that they could capture them. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Do you have to know your ideal customer before you can build your 2x2? That's the first step. You know your ideal customer before you now start your segmentation and every other thing.
It's similar to what I would say, what I answered to the last question. You just have an idea right now of who your ideal customer is,
Okay.
but then you refine it as you collect more data and start to realize who actually is buying your product, who is interested in your service, what are their needs, what are their behaviors, how are you meeting them. So that ideal customer might change.
Okay.
As they did with Coca-Cola. They at first were targeting the thirsty, then they realized they want more of the millennials. Yes. Can you shout? Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, and this really was only talking about B2C, so business to consumer. For B2B, you should also do one for a marketplace model. There should definitely be a segmentation done on those who are supplying the service, because you want to acquire both. All right, awesome. I'm going to turn the mic over to Avery. But it was great talking with you and learning from you. Thank you for keeping the session lively. And looking forward to talking with you more. I have business cards. If you have any questions, if anything comes to mind after, feel free to email me. Ashley and Avery, they're based here and are more than happy to help too. So Accion Venture Lab is here for all of you, and we're excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hey guys, give me 1 second to switch these so I can show you my couple slides. I'd like to start FinTech Ventures. All right, so this is the situation we have. There's a lot of information here, but the basic thing is that we have two things happening at the same time. FinTech investment is growing rapidly in Nigeria as our FinTech startups in a variety of areas. So not just payments, not just remittances, but all sorts of things, from insurance to Bitcoin to trading, all sorts of things. But at the same time, you have a lot of people who are not included in the financial system. So while you have all this investment happening, there's still a huge untapped market that isn't being served by by enough of the existing solutions. So to address that, we are wondering, if you have this big market opportunity and you have a lot of people investing in this space, we'd like to know why we don't have more people beating down our door to start FinTech companies. So we are wondering, is it because you don't have a team? Because you need to refine your business model, you don't have the funding. And so we're like, okay, let's try to address some of those issues. And so what we came up with is the Accion Venture Lab Company Builder. So our goal is to bring together extraordinary people to build inclusive FinTech startups from scratch in Nigeria. So to do that, we're going to go through 4 stages. So we're going to recruit about 15 people with diverse skill sets. So we're going to do consumer-facing FinTech. So we are looking for, not only developers, not only people with banking experience, but designers, people who might have worked at FMCG, people who might have worked at a telco, people who really understand that customer, and then people who understand financial services and technology. We want to get a group of about 15, bring them together to think about ideas or refine the ideas they already have, and find the people who might be their potential teammates. And so once we come up with some good ideas, we'll rank them. And we'll take the top ones and have that group of 15 break into smaller groups, which might end up being the nucleus of a founding team, to go out and validate these ideas. So we'll sit down and think with you about what proof points will we need to see as investors, and what any investor would need to see to say, okay, we could give this kind of venture seed capital. And then the validation groups would go out, get those proof points, see if they can get some traction, come up with an MVP. And when they do that, we will select the best of those startups to invest in their pilot and kind of provide, a lot of strategic and financial support to help them get to a seed stage round. So that's kind of the process that we're looking at completing here. And after that, we're going to help you build your startup and then grow. After you finish that pilot, as I was saying earlier, ideally we would like to be able to invest in the company from our fund, and we also invest with a lot of other funds in the ecosystem. So it connect you to some financing to be able to keep growing that business. So there's a couple things that are important to us. As we were mentioning earlier, financial inclusion is kind of the overarching theme of Accion. It's not just FinTech in and of itself. But we do think that the beauty of bringing these two things together is that we think that transformational change is possible, and that FinTechs will kind of be on the vanguard of that. And so we're looking for people, there's a range of ways to get to inclusion. I mean, it can be higher quality, cheaper, more convenient, safer, more accessible. And we also are looking for, better quality, reduced cost, and things that can scale. So if these are kind of areas that appeal to you, things you might have experience with, those are the kind of people we're looking for. Those are the kind of ideas we're looking for in this project. And I was saying as they mentioned earlier, we invested in Lydia here that, serves micro enterprises with lending capital, which, kind of is underserved, but it's an innovative model to meet the needs of that segment. As I said, we are looking for all sorts of people. We are really, like, the roles that we kind of envision on a founding team are kind of someone who would deal with the financial services aspect, especially if it's a direct, like, financial services firm. Like, if you're doing lending, somebody on the team needs to know how to do lending. If it's heavy on tech, you definitely need somebody who has that background. And then somebody who has a background in product or design, or somebody who can kind of take that role of putting the two together. But those people can come from a range of backgrounds. So as you guys can see, we're looking, this is not a fully inclusive list, but we just wanted to make it clear that if you aren't a banker, if you aren't a developer, there's space for you. If you haven't worked at a startup, it's fine. You can be a first-time founder. If you have a startup experience and you want to do it again, you're also welcome. And so that's kind of what we are looking for. And the goal is to kind of get you on this table, right? These are the fintech startups in Nigeria. And we would like to add a company to this list. So if you're interested, check out our website, accion.org/Venture Lab. You can send me an email. I'll let you guys see my email, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to answer any quick questions you may have. And I'll also be at our Fintech office hours, which are in this building downstairs. So, if you don't get a chance to ask a question now, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. Any quick questions? First hand. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely one. My question is I'm glad I saw something that concerns me, which I feel that we should also be looking at. We've been focusing more on the fintech, okay, and I know that there's also room for us to also be looking at insurtech. Okay, I work with an insurance company, and the truth is, in Nigeria, the penetration rate has been, it's low. It's totally low, about 3% thereabout, and globally, there's a move in that direction too. There's so much disruption in the insurance, sector. I feel that companies should also be thinking toward that direction too, to see how to capture the market now. The good news is the industry in Nigeria, insurance industry, it's growing. We are all aware that an alliance just came into Nigeria. That's to show you that something is happening in the insurance sector. So please, my question is, what is your company doing in that direction? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. We count InsurTech. Is InsurTech on here? We count InsurTech as fintech. So when we say fintech, we mean this in the broadest possible light. I took down the slide of the 31 companies that we've actually invested in, but we've invested in everything. We are looking at insurance, actually right now. We've invested in crop insurance, but we've also invested in everything from data analytics, credit repair, all these kind of other things that facilitate access to financial services. So not only do we mean fintech in the kind of broad sense of actual types of financial services, such as insurance, but we also mean, are there tools, are there processes within that space that can also be improved to increase access?
What does Accion get from investing in startups?
Cool. Well, so let me give you a kind of idea of what Accion is. So there's a couple things. Accion is this big global NGO that started about 60 years ago. Our whole thing is financial inclusion. So everything we do filters through that. You guys might know Accion Microfinance Bank here. We do a lot of work with microfinance banks all over the world. What we do, what Ashley, Corey, and I do, is work at our seed stage fintech investing fund that likes to approach kind of serving the same customers as A and B, but doing it through investing in fintechs. So for us, what we get out of it is alignment with our mission. We also hope to get a return. I mean, this is a proper fund, so we are, we are investing in companies, and we'd like to see them do well. we are not going, oh, that is something I should highlight. We are, unlike most company builder programs, we are not going to take majority equity in these companies. So you and your team will be the actual owners, the majority owners of this company after it comes out of this program. So it's a little different.
Is $500,000 the maximum you invest?
So for this program, to get you through pilot, we're not going to invest more than $100,000, but that's to get you from MVP through a pilot where you could raise a seed round. Now, from our fund, we don't raise because we are usually people's first institutional round, right? We don't usually invest more than $500,000, but the round itself may be over $1 million, right? Or it probably is over $1 million, and there's other investors in the round. So that's our ticket in any given round, but that's not necessarily the amount raised by the startups we invest in. Cool. All right. So if anybody else has any more questions, you can come see me, or we will be downstairs doing office hours till about 2. All right. Thank you, guys.